You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. I'm going to kick off the show by just getting out of the way that Jerry Reinsdorf is a coward. I don't care if he's a billionaire or not. After a season like that, he should have been in front of microphones instead of releasing just an expanded version of his original statement about how sad and disappointed and upset he is that the team didn't do very well this year. If he's not in front of microphones, at least when they announce the new manager, it really needs to be noted by the press. It was insulting, Ed, to see it on social media. It felt like an invasion of my personal space to see it in my inbox when they hit send and sent that garbage. They're like, oh, I'm so sad and we're going to get better. And nobody believes you. You're cutting payroll. You hired internally at GM. You have had so many things written about you to prove that you're never going to change after 40 years of being one of the worst owners in sports. Definitely one of the worst owners in baseball history. And then to get that thing inside of my mailbox, I reported it as junk mail. That's what I did. And then I moved on with my life.
It's just not Jerry's words either, is it?
No, somebody wrote that. Somebody wrote that and he signed it. We've talked about that.
Yeah, and that's when you see a press release like this, it really is. It's just by the book, by the numbers. Let me respond to Ken Rosenthal. Let me respond to ESPN. Let me respond to all the criticisms that have been played out in the national media as the White Sox broke the record for the most losses in a season. Jerry has his name, not even his signature to it, right? It's just Jerry Reinsdorf in italics. I mean, it's not even something where you could sit there and say this feels like his personalized, his deep, actual, heartfelt sentiments.
There's no personalization for somebody who thinks of all of us as peons and just the little people who get in the way of his billionaire fantasy of running a baseball team into the ground. Look, that letter, they probably started crafting it the day after the Rosenthal article, when the reports are that it was an all-hands-on-deck meeting in the front office. That's probably the nexus, the beginning of that letter that eventually goes out, and many people probably had their hands in it, and Jerry Reinsdorf probably had very little to do with it.
He probably looked at it and said, yeah, go ahead, send this out. I'll give him that much, and I'll give him that. There are some things that are said in this letter, and there's some things that are coming out of the White Sox that they have to say, and they have to honestly believe, because you can't repeat this in any way, shape, or form.
Listen, if you want to prove to me that you're going to make changes, it all starts with what you're going to do with the current roster going into the offseason. If I don't see a real change in philosophy, if I see them basically bring everybody back, then no, there is really no change. Nothing's going to happen. I'll feel a little crushed, but I'll have expected it. Because, look, Yoan Moncada and Max Stassi should be bought out for $5.5 million. You have Benintendi and Luis Robert Jr. on the books for $32.1 million. You got a couple $1 million in salary that's either deferred or that is carried over, and then you've got the ARB candidates. I'm not giving arbitration to anybody except Garrett Crochet, who may end up getting traded. Bob Nightingale saying that, even though Crochet wants an extension, the team's leaning towards trading him. And I take that one with a grain of salt. I normally listen to a lot of what Bob says, but throughout the year, Nightingale kept pushing they're going to trade him thing, and we always felt like Getz may not really want to trade him. He's only going to do it if it's the right deal, and it was Tony that's likely talking to Nightingale, who has different designs on things. So that's still going to become an internal thing inside the building. But Crochet gets offered arbitration, but I'm not giving arbitration to Nicky Lopez, who made $4.3 million and will get a bump. He's not worth it. Andrew Vaughn does not deserve $5 million next year for being a negative F WAR player and a just above zero B WAR player. I don't care if he was one of the better offensive weapons that you had. Every weapon on the team was bad. He's just the best of crap. That's not worth $5 million. Tim Elko can go and play first base. And let's be honest, as we've said before, don't offer any arbitration. Have the lowest payroll in baseball. Sit at around $90 million, $93 million. and you have $50 million to spend. Bring in some pieces. Bring in a hitter or two. Have one of them stand at first base. It's the deepest position in free agency right now. And I'm not saying you have to keep that guy. I'm not saying you sign him to a 5-year deal. You might want to, but at least have pieces you can move at the deadline if that's the direction you're going in. Nobody's going to want Andrew Vaughn at the midway point. There's no value to get rid of him. And all he is just a space filler. So don't offer him arbitration. Chris Flexen, I'm not offering it to him. Yeah, I know he battled in there and he was trying really hard and the team let him down a lot of times. But his whip, his walks and hits per innings pitch is like 1.5. That's terrible for a starting pitcher. He would not make any other rotation in baseball. He's just one of the better pieces in a pile of crap. You have so many young pitchers, 7 or 8 of them right now, that have touched the major leagues in some way that may be part of your future in the rotation. You should be pitching those guys. Move along from him. Spend your money on relief pitchers and bats. You can flip them in the middle of the season, unless you catch lightning in a bottle, for prospects, high-end prospects, top 100 prospects, guys that are up high on lists in other organizations. Go grab a couple of good relief pitchers you can move. Teams are always looking for them. Go sign a couple of bats. Maybe one of them's long-term. Maybe one of them is somebody who you think you could flip later on. Use your money that way, have a low-end payroll, be a better team, and drop guys like Sheets, Steven Wilson. I mean, Matt Foster, maybe I keep Matt Foster on. He's like the one guy I went back and forth on. Maybe I keep him. Jimmy Lambert. I mean, he's been on the show before, but I don't see anything Jimmy's done. He's 29 years old right now. He's not going to become anything for you. Danny Mendick, nice guy. Goodbye. I'm not giving anybody on the arbitration list a tender except for Garrett Crochet. If you do that, then I will accept whatever you do this offseason as you have a plan. If you bring back garbage just because you're afraid to move on from it because it might get better, and it probably won't, but it might get better in another organization, then you're cowards just like your owner, and there is no change to what's going on the South Side.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a name like Matt Foster as a potential tender candidate. I would allow for some of that, a little bit of a Matt Foster here or there, okay? Because there are some guys that you just sit there and go, well, what am I going to spend on the free agent market to replace Matt Foster in my bullpen? And if what his anticipated contract amount, his anticipated amount in arbitration is going to be,
it's probably $1 million because he made $750.
Yeah, so if he's going to be a guy that you're going to basically sign out in free agency, and you like Matt Foster, okay, that makes sense. But to your point, Chris Flexen is going to get a bump. No, you don't want Chris Flexen getting a bump. And Andrew Vaughn is. The experiment is over, okay? He's not going to live up to the hype. I think the previous regime ruined him by rushing him to the majors. I will die on that hill. And he might be a good dude, and he might have a future somewhere else, but he might also be somebody that, I stumbled across a video on social media of Trevor Bauer pitching to Luke Voit. Remember when Luke Voit was a thing?
Right.
He was hitting home runs and playing first base for the Yankees.
Andrew Vaughn and Luke Voit. There's not much of a difference there. I don't know. I might have taken Luke Voit over the last year over Andrew Vaughn. I mean, look,
you might have.
Andrew Vaughn and his story and what happened behind the scenes and who was responsible for him being rushed up. Do you wonder if Getz keeps him? It's because Getz was one of the voices that believed in him so much. Like, if Getz moves on from him, you can sit there and say, well, he didn't make the pick. He didn't select him. Yeah, he was in charge of player development, but he might have been the guy in the room saying, it ain't time to bring this guy up yet. If he keeps him, then you start to feel like Getz was also one of the problems in the Andrew Vaughn debacle.
Yeah.
Because why would you keep him? There's no logical reason. If you are a stone-faced general manager who is trying to rebuild something from basically nothing, and you're trying to tell me that you're going to change the way things operate in there from top to bottom, and what the last regime did was not you, even though you were in the building, I don't see how you look at Andrew Vaughn, his production, what he does, the streakiness, the replacement levelness of everything, the bad defense over at first base, and justify keeping him around. There are players that are going to be floating in the Major League Baseball ether as free agents that you could sign that you'll get better production than Andrew Vaughn. Rowdy Tellez just got dropped from the Pirates, and
Rowdy's numbers aren't great. They're not great, but Rowdy Tellez probably is cheaper than $5 million.
Right, and he's the same guy.
And he's a left-handed bat.
Right.
So
I mean, that's the thing. Here's the thing. There's nothing special about this kid. It's the thing that, like, I think I noticed a lot of fans. James Fox of Future Sox was one of the other guys. I've done it on social media. It said you can't tender this kid. I've seen James Fox do it. I've seen some other people covering a team do it. People attack and they get angry about it, but their argument always seems to be, and this is the prevalent argument amongst White Sox fans for keeping Andrew Vaughn next year, is who else is going to play there?
Well, that's a bad argument.
It's a terrible argument. Sox in the Basement listeners, keep mom and dad, grandma and grandpa out of assisted living and help them switch to a new age of life with Hyatt Home Medical Equipment. Make it so they can get around on their own. Live independently. It's all about living independently with stair lifts, ramps, grab bars, lift chairs, and even bathroom remodeling. Somebody coming out of a surgery also, you could use Hyatt Home Medical Equipment. They work with your insurance and have 0% financing for qualified individuals. If you use a CPAP machine and sound like Darth Vader while you go to bed every night, there are better options out there. Switch to a new vendor. Get a new machine. Get all of your supplies directly mailed to you and test out the latest and greatest in CPAP machines in their showroom. They also have the latest in continuous glucose monitors. See all that Hyatt Home Medical Equipment has to offer at hhme.com. I want to get into the postseason. I want to talk about joyous baseball. I still love baseball, but I get the feeling that Ed has more he wants to talk about as to why that is a dumb argument. Oh, I can't get rid of Andrew Vaughn because who else is going to play over at first base?
I mean, look, Miguel Vargas hasn't exactly lit it up as a third baseman, all right? And you got to figure out where defensively Brian Ramos fits if you're going to give him a chance to play every day.
But I would rather see what those two guys can do than have another year of Vaughn. Put Vargas at first and put Ramos at third.
And that's exactly the point. And we've talked about Lenyn Sosa having, a little bit of a Doctor Strange glove aspect to him. And, there's a lot of guys that can stand at first base and DH, okay, and be part of the team and be part of the lineup. Those are the two easiest positions in the world to fill. You just have to have a guy who can hit and not screw up in the case of the first baseman. With Andrew Vaughn, I think the real question is, if he's got value, why not trade him? And if he doesn't really have $5 million worth of value, then non-tender him. And if he's still sitting out there in the free agent market and you want him back, you can always bring him back. You can always re-sign him.
That's the point that everybody seems to forget. You could non-tender Andrew Vaughn, and he goes into a pile of all these other first basemen that are out there. All these other guys that are just going to be floating there with a price tag of around the same thing, that do the same thing, that are all replacement level. And you could say, we're not tendering you. We're going to stay open to the idea of possibly bringing you back, and then go see what you can go and do. And you could still find Andrew Vaughn or somebody just like him in the latter part of the offseason. Locking yourself into this guy like he means something is ridiculous. I don't care if he's the nicest guy in the world. I don't care if he's just an absolute sweetheart and everybody in the building loves him. He walks along, he pets dogs on the head and he kisses babies and he's just the nicest guy in the whole. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. This is a business. This is a game that is so many people rely on. Like, everybody always sits there and says, well, it's just a game. I want to like my players. Forget that. I want to win, first of all. So I really don't care about how nice you are. I care about how well you play the game. And I want to see the team do well. And what people don't understand is when the team does bad, everybody falters. People outside of the ballpark falter. Grandstand Sports has a harder time selling stuff. Cork and carry at the park. I mean, as many people go there because they listen to us talk about them. It's hard to draw crowds like you normally would draw. You have a lot of small business owners around the ballpark that I'm sure that I know are feeling the crunch of this. The only guy who's not feeling the crunch is the billionaire. The billionaire is doing just fine. Everybody else, people can lose jobs. Coaches can lose jobs. A lot of livelihoods depend on the performance of the team. So before you start worrying about Andrew Vaughn's feelings or what kind of a guy he is, start thinking of what happens to all the other innocents that depend on the team playing well and Andrew Vaughn being a good performer or whoever's in his spot being a good performer. Keeping him around can harm other people that don't really deserve it. He's not a good enough ball player to give $5 million to and stick over at first base for the next 162 games. He's not. You have to start making a change in your organization. You should start with a base of Tim Elko standing at first base, and then if in free agent, you find somebody that you want to put there. you go sign that guy and he goes back to the minors. Or you sign somebody and he platoons with them at first base and DH like they did with Sheets and Vaughn. But Sheets and Vaughn don't need to be there anymore. Whatever you do in the future, those two guys are not part of it. And if they are part of it, every single thing you're saying, every single thing you're writing, everything you're telling me about how you're going to change things is BS. Because nothing's going to change. It doesn't matter if you change your analytics department. That's not going to magically make Andrew Vaughn a better player. It's just not. Go in another direction.
For those that are sitting there saying, well, he's one of the faces of the franchise, or, he is one of my favorite players. How? My question to you is how? Because first of all, when it comes to personalities in White Sox history, not every single person who is a beloved White Sox player, who is somebody that we all sit back and sit there and go, wow, I really loved him, was an effusive, great personality or a wonderful charitable person. I mean, by all accounts, for example, AJ Pierzynski's not very well liked by a lot of people. However, White Sox fans have a very positive opinion of AJ Pierzynski in general, right? He's beloved on the South Side because he was the catcher and one of the big personalities for the World Series winning White Sox. And, you look back through history. I mean, it's not a necessity to have guys on the team that are nice guys.
Here's a perfect example, Ed, because I want to get to the baseball playoffs thing. So I'm just for anybody that's trying to figure out what Andrew Vaughn is, let's compare him to another guy that used to hit in the middle of the order. He shows up every once in a while as a ambassador for the White Sox. I've seen him sign autographs on different levels and played some first base, some DH, sometimes some outfield. He played 10 seasons in the major leagues, most of them with the Chicago White Sox. And over those 10 seasons as a 10.7 win above replacement B-WAR, which means about 1 win above replacement level player. I think that's better
Psycho
right
Lions?
now than Vaughn. No. Dan Pasqua.
Oh, Dan the Hammer Pasqua.
Dan Pasqua, 244 career hitter with a 768 OPS. Andrew Vaughn, that's right now like what he strives to be.
Right.
So I don't know why I want to keep Dan Pasqua on my team, no matter how nice he is, if I want to get better. And I don't know why I want to keep Andrew Vaughn. Let's talk about the postseason, because there's going to be good baseball played, and I enjoy the postseason, and I enjoy watching good baseball be played, and I wish it was my team that was doing it, but I was looking at the teams that were in it, and I was curious, my friend, is there anybody that you are rooting for? Before we go through who we think is going to win, is there anybody that you're rooting for or heavily rooting against? Because I know that I would love to see a couple teams win it. I would love to see the Brewers win it, because they've never won one. I would love to see the Padres win it, because it's a smaller market team that spent money, even though they could have sat back and not spent money. And they could have just reaped the rewards of the revenue sharing thing. And I would like to see an owner who does that see a victory as a message to other owners. I'm a fan of the Phillies. I am. And it's going to be hard for me not to root for a team that could have been my team, because we should have had some of those stars that are on that team, and them winning is just another thing that shows that the White Sox screwed it all up and should have gone out and gotten guys like Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber and Nick Castellanos, and they should have overpaid enough to get Wheeler here. That team right there is what the White Sox could have been team. So on the National League side, I've got plenty of them. I have a hard time rooting for the Orioles because they were stingy with their prospects, and I hate them. Yankee fans are obnoxious, even though one of my best friends is a Yankee fan. They're obnoxious. I think Kansas City Royal fans are the worst fans in the world. I'm sick of the Houston Astros. I want them eliminated immediately. It's very hard for me to root for the Tigers or the Guardians as division rivals. If anything comes out of that side, I might say Guardians because they have the longest drought, right? But it would be begrudging. I become a National League fan for this entire thing.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I don't love the idea of a Detroit Tigers or a Kansas City Royals World Series victory. Cleveland, yes, it would be nice to get Cleveland off the schneid, I guess. To a certain degree, I can go along with breaking long streaks, but it just, the only positive about any of the three AL Central teams that are in there taking it all the way to the World Series or even winning the World Series is just another nail in the coffin of a 2024 White Sox season that was also predicated on the idea that you could compete in the weakest division in baseball, the one that has now 3 playoff teams on the AL side. And so therefore it's not the weakest division in Major League Baseball. And so, just that hubris alone too, being put forth is there's some some satisfaction to that, not much.
If the American League Central wins it, you're right. It kind of shows something. On the other hand, like a team like Detroit wins, and you're going to convince Jerry you don't need to have a $100 million payroll. That's the problem.
Which is fine. You know what? And I'm okay with the idea that a team that doesn't have a $100 million payroll could win it. Okay. And I'm not against the idea that the White Sox could be one of those teams, but they're not. Okay. The organization's just not built for that. And in no way, shape, or form is it built for that. Now, Detroit is a team that spends wildly and stupidly sometimes too. Javi Baez is still there. So you have some of that going on. Really, I would like just somebody from the AL to be cannon fodder for the Phillies. I'm going to go along with you on that one. I mean, the Brewers are another team that it's been a long time for them. They
never won one. I don't think they've ever won one. No,
you're right. I don't think now you mentioned that.
As the Pilots or as the Brewers, they have never won one, and neither have the Padres.
Neither have the Padres.
Yeah.
So it'd be nice to see one of those two teams get it. But I'm something of a Phillies fan too. One, because of the reasons that you laid out, where that's a team that we have. But two, admittedly, my brother-in-law is a huge Phillies fan. He's from Philadelphia. So the two teams that we talk about when we get together, we talk about the White Sox and the Phillies.
They feel like a Southside team, right?
They feel like a team that we could get behind.
They got like attitude, and they're going to be the fun team to watch. And I lean towards them the last couple of years. So I'll probably lean towards them in any time that they're out there. But the Padres would be interesting. Like, it'd be nice to see the Padres work their way through their side of the bracket, right? Like, if they could get through Atlanta and then they can get past the Dodgers, shock that team. That's the evil empire. Beat them. And then you run into the Phillies. That would be a great NLCS. I would really enjoy that.
Phillies NLCS would be a lot of fun to watch. Yeah. And I will say too, back to the AL side of things, it would be nice to see Detroit take out the Astros, and then I don't care between Cleveland and Detroit who makes it to the ALCS on that side. But I will say that as much as the Orioles annoy the hell out of me with the way that they approach the trade market and their unwillingness to give up real quality guys, and they're sort of hoarding these prospects that they don't even have room for, it would be nice for them to push past the Yankees and get back to the ALCS. They're another team that it's just been a long time, but it's poor ownership there too. So I don't really care if they win or not.
But if they need pitching, like if the reason they lose is because they didn't have enough pitching, it would be poetic. And then maybe in the offseason, they become a trade partner if the Sox really want to move on from Crochet. Or if the Sox say, we've got all this pitching depth prospect-wise, why don't we swap a pitching prospect for a legit hitting prospect? Because that's something the Sox probably really want to do. Would make an awful lot of sense. That's their only, if you think about what the White Sox have, besides if somebody believes Luis Robert Jr. just needs to be in a better place, or somebody looks at Crochet and says, we're only looking at that first half because he hadn't pitched that much and we really value him. Besides those two pieces, it's their depth pitching-wise, young pitchers that they have if they want to actually make moves in the offseason to reshape the team. So a team falling short pitching-wise is good for the White Sox in the offseason. I mean, that's how I'm looking at it. Like, I'm enjoying October baseball, but I'm hoping that some of these teams that really should have made a move to add pitching and have the guys that we want, I hope they stumble because they didn't have the pitching. I hope they come out of it and go, we screwed up. Next year we need to do this. Let's figure this out. And the Orioles would be a perfect candidate because they may not go spend on free agent pitching. They may instead, say it's about time that we made a move and make a decision. Sox in the Basement listeners trying to make the most of your money. Give a call to Tom Walsh, your Edward Jones financial advisor. Located on the corner of 111th and Kedzie, but serving the Chicagoland area, Tom has a get-to-know-you approach and a do-the-right-thing attitude. He's been doing this for decades. It's all about knowing your options when you're investing and planning for your retirement. No matter what stage you are at, it costs nothing to check in with Tom. Give Tom Walsh, your Edward Jones financial advisor, a call today, 773-779-0023. Edward Jones, member SIPC. Let's go through this before we get done. I want your actual picks. Who you think is going to win.
Okay.
We'll start on the AL side. We've got the 3-seeded division-winning Astros hosting the Tigers. And remember, game 1 of these wildcard series will be done by the time this show comes out. But it's a 3-game series. You never know where it's going to go. So we're doing this right now, talking before the games have been played.
My sense is that the Astros have the advantage in that, and I think they win a wild card round series almost every time.
Yeah, experience. They got pitching. Skubal goes out and beats Valdez in the first game. Like I said, if people are listening to this and the Tigers are up 1-0, they have a chance. If they lost, it's already over. That's kind of how I see that. If you look down at the other wild card team, you've got the Orioles, the 4 seed, and the 5 seeded Royals. The Royals are hot right now. The Orioles have been kind of stumbling a little bit.
I think the Royals, I think the Royals carry their momentum in. I'm not overly impressed. For as much as we talk about all the hoarded prospects that the Orioles have had, they're not showing up when it counts.
Right. They feel like that team that gets to the postseason the first time, like the White Sox when they got there the first time. They against the A's, like it's going to be exciting, but they'll probably fall short. Like that's what I think happens.
The talent is better on the Orioles side, honestly, but like the A's were with the White Sox in 2020, they're just not ready.
Yeah,
they're not there yet.
I think next year they make a deep run. So before we go over to the National League side, that gives us the Guardians and the Astros, because we both seem to think the same thing. The 2 and the 3 seed going up to try to make it to the ALCS to get to the Final Four.
Yeah, and
I think the Guardians win.
No, see there I'm going to diverge. I think the Astros win.
You think the Astros win?
I do. I think the Guardians have enough pitching problems of their own that it's going to be difficult on them.
All right. Well, I don't want to see the Astros and the Yankees. I think that would make me sick.
I wouldn't watch either.
I wouldn't watch that series because I think the Yankees beat the Royals. So what you're saying is that do you believe that too? I think the Yankees win. Don't you think so?
I think that's a foregone conclusion. I think the Royals will come down with mystery ailments for that series.
This would be gross and awful.
No, it would be disgusting.
Oh gosh, this would be all about like the Astros are a bunch of cheaters, and then it'd be everybody go, well, the Yankees did this, and it would just be I know it's great for television, and that's what would bother me about it. Like if I start seeing questionable calls, I'm gonna really feel like Major League Baseball wants that matchup. That's the matchup they want.
The worst part is there's no natural disasters that could cut that series short either.
Yes. So unfortunately, we're going to have to watch the whole thing. So I will assume that you're right about the Astros. Gosh, please don't. I would rather, if the Astros face the Yankees, I'd rather see the Yankees. I know. I hate the Astros more than anybody. I hate them.
I agree with you. I'd much rather have the Yankees come out of the AL in that scenario. And I do think the Yankees are going to make it all the way to the World Series. That would be my pick coming out of the AL.
Astros, I'm going to hate it. I don't want to see them. I don't want to see the Astros ever win.
But now here's the good news.
Ever.
Whether it's the Astros or the Yankees, that means that, and we've already talked about how we've got more that we want to follow in the National League and teams that we want to root for in the National League. It'll feel much better when the National League team wins over either the Yankees or the Astros.
Whatever comes from the American League is just something I don't want. So let's figure out who makes it from the National League. The Mets, I mean, that explosion in that tiebreaker game against Atlanta, that made me believe they may have something there. And I really like the Brewers, but I think the Mets upset the Brewers.
I do too. I'm not impressed by the Brewers. I think they have a good team, but I honestly think they also came out of a really bad division because there's not a whole lot going on in the NL Central. So that's, I think, by attrition because the other teams in that division were so bad. I just was never really thinking that the Brewers were going to be much of anything. So I think they're cannon fodder for a Mets team that, kind of like the Royals coming in, is just hot right now.
All right, and I think the Padres beat the Braves, even if the Braves win Game 1, which they could do, because I keep thinking about this, okay, they just played, then they got to go turn around and play, and I still think that the Braves just, one of those, remember when the Angels came in after they had just finished that series in 2005, and it was like, they've had 3 hours of sleep, and they had to cross the country, and they beat us 1-0. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if the Braves win Game 1, but I think the Padres win the series.
I will actually. I'm going to take the Braves in that one.
Really?
Yeah. I as much as I do like the Padres, and I think they're a good team, the Braves are becoming one of those teams that hangs around way more than they should in the playoffs.
All right. So now we've got the Phillies.
However, I think Aaron Bummer will have two clutch moments. One clutch for the Braves and one very, very clutch for the Padres.
There's definitely going to be a bummer moment. All right,
yes, there will be a bummer moment.
Phillies Mets is going to be a fun series for the East Coast. I think that'll be a great series. I think the Phillies win that one.
Yeah, I'm taking the Phillies in that one too,
Okay.
but I agree. That's going to be one of those series that the whole country should just watch because it's going to be a riot.
Okay. And then
Maybe even literally.
you and I have different people, different teams facing the Dodgers. I have expressed that I would love San Diego to make it all the way, but I think the Dodgers win.
And I don't think the Dodgers have a problem with the Braves either. I think the Braves, like I said, the Braves are going to hang around longer than they should, meaning they're going to beat the Padres when they shouldn't. But they'll make it interesting maybe against the Dodgers every game, but it's going to be one of those things where they're very, very interesting for 7 out of the 9 innings, and the other 2 are a complete disaster for them.
All right, so on the American League side, we had a 1 versus a 3 in the ALCS. On this one, we got the 1 versus the 2. So we've played it very safe, even though we've had some upsets up to this point. But now I got the 2 beating the 1 because the Phillies go to the World Series, and then I have the Phillies beating whoever is facing them on the American League side.
And that's where I want to see it go. I will say I have the Phillies over the Dodgers. I have the Phillies in the World Series. I am not 100% convinced that the Phillies can beat the Yankees or the Astros. I think that's going to be a great series in terms of going back and forth. So I would almost want to call it a toss-up. But my heart, which is probably going to damn the Phillies, my heart is with the Phillies taking it.
I think that's where my heart is too. Like I mean, like that's the team I think wins. That's the team that I'm going to enjoy rooting for. I will not have a problem rooting for the Mets. I would not have a problem rooting for the Brewers. I would not have a problem rooting for the Padres. Like, I mean, like, there's a lot of teams on the National League side that I would enjoy watching win and all have a legitimate chance. But the Phillies seem like not only the team that like my heart is being pulled towards, but like that I think could actually win the thing. Now, they'll probably get eliminated immediately by the Brewers, who I thought was going to be beat by the Mets, and we'll sound like morons on this show, but that's where we're at, I think. So I think that's where we're at. I think what we have is we've got Philadelphia playing the Yankees.
When it's Brewers Tigers, however, we'll just look back at this and go, why are you listening to us?
Brewers Tigers would be awesome. Seriously.
Amazing
like if you want to find like a miracle matchup, I want both 6 seeds. Imagine Detroit versus New York. Tigers Mets. The series nobody saw coming.
Yeah, the series.
Well, I'm trying to figure out which one is the matchup that will kill Major League Baseball ratings that they don't want.
Oh, Tigers Brewers would kill Major League Baseball ratings.
Oh, I think Royals Brewers would kill Major League Baseball ratings.
Oh, yeah, Royals Brewers. Yeah, that would do it too.
Royals Brewers would definitely kill Major. They would hate that. They don't want some of these teams to make it there. But the Royals or the Tigers making it to the World Series hurts their ratings. That we'll be talking 2005 numbers when nobody cared about the White Sox and the Astros. That's what it'll be. All over again. We'll get a mention. That'd be great. We get a mention.
There you go. There you go. We'll get a mention and then almost immediately get bashed by the national media.
Another indignation. Even their World Series, nobody watched it.
The worst ratings since the 2005 World Series when the Astros were there against...
what was this team? Was that the Cubs?
Somebody.
No,
the
somebody.
The Astros won it that year, right?
The other Chicago team.
It's another Chicago team?
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found and always on soxinthebasement.com.